The Lunch Bunch Kindie Keeners, Chapter 22, June, Little Kids Can Do Big Things. June was always both joyful and jittery for the students and staff at Mountain Creek Elementary School. On the joyful side, there were many celebrations like Father's Day, Sports Day, the year-end assembly, and of course, the start of 2 glorious summer months off of school. On the jittery side, there were many big tasks to do to finish off the school year. Probably the biggest jittery June annual problem was that by the May long weekend, some students had shut down. Matthew and Brandon were tired and cranky. "I just want to ride my bike after school and stay up late. I can't sleep when it's still light out," Brandon told Andrew. "Me too, Brandon. We want to play kick the can till dark, and Mom always shuts us down early on school nights." Andrew said, "I bet Leroy, who's afraid of the dark, loves the spring with long days." Pooja and Ashley were tired of school too. Do you feel good? Do you feel ready for a good break from school, Pooja?" asked Ashley. "I love coming to kindergarten, but I'm ready to sleep in," Pooja agreed. "My mom keeps a countdown at home about how many sleeps till she doesn't have to make lunches anymore. I'm sick of sandwiches." All in all, the highs and lows of June made for some unpredictable emotional days in the classroom. It was decided that the year-end assembly would be held at the beginning of the month instead of the end. There were too many field trips and other celebrations going on, so the staff decided to try something different this year. The first Friday of June was the day for the Mountain Creek Elementary School year-end assembly. "What will happen in the gym for us today, Ms. M?" wondered Pooja. "Good question, Pooja. We have a tradition at Mountain Creek for the year-end assembly. The grade 6 students will hand out the kindergarten graduation certificates to you." It was a time to celebrate the successful year and hand out sport and academic, music, and citizenship awards to the students. Some of the older classes entertain the audience with music festival numbers and skits. "I wonder if they need us to sing a duet," Pooja wondered. Frances. Pooja shrugged her shoulders. Finally, Mrs. O'Neill called the grade 6s and the kindies to the front of the gym. The kindergarten students looked so small compared to the grade 6s. As the kindies stood proudly at the front of the gym, they saw someone waving from the rows of students sitting on the floor. Only LB6 waved back excitedly to their grade 3 friend, Leroy. The grade 6s passed out the certificates to each kindie. The audience loved this ritual and clapped and cheered wildly as the group waved their certificates at them. As the children were led back to their sitting space on the gym floor, Ms. M and Granny Janny took the certificates and held them until home time. Experience from the past of certificates being a distraction and being folded into airplanes or getting crushed and crumpled prompted the adults to remember this important step. Frances and Ashley were at school early on Monday morning. It was a lovely morning, and the girls were pleased to see each other and get a good play in before school. When they arrived, they were not the first people in the playground. The crew from Alberta Playground Playtopia was already unloading the van to finish up their playground warranty work. "Rats," said Ashley. "Oh no," agreed Frances. "I was hoping we could have some playtime on the equipment. I forgot it would be closed down for the next 3 days or so." "I forgot that too, Frances." The girls knew to stay back from the crew so they could safely bring in and set up the equipment they needed. "Hi again," shouted the boss guy to Frances. He recognized her from the last time they were in town. Frances was always up for a conversation and went over to say hi. Ashley was mortified that Frances would talk to strangers. "Frances, do you know him?" she asked. "We do know each other from the last time they were here, Ashley." They had a quick visit, and the crew lead said they needed to get back to work. "Where's the rest of your crew today?" Frances asked. The boss guy rolled his eyes and said, "Break." He turned to head back to the van to unload when Frances stopped in her tracks. On the back of his shirt was the company logo, Alberta Playground Playtopia, Edmonton, Alberta. That was funny, she thought, because they were just talking about Edmonton. She pointed to it and whispered to Ashley, "That t-shirt says Edmonton." Out of the corner of her eye, Ashley noticed two members of the crew walking towards the van, and they seemed to be coming from the walkway door. "Frances, did you see where those two came from?" Frances was starting to put some important pieces together. "I didn't see them when we first came to the playground. Were they in the walkway? I'm getting scared. Let's go to the front of the school and wait for the others," urged Ashley. Frances was right beside her with eyes open wide. "Ashley, first, the boss guy's shirt said they were from Edmonton. Second, the last time they were doing warranty work when Matthew and I were on the playground lookout, they said the playground equipment was 3 years old and needed its warranty checkup. Third, 2 adults and maybe crew members were in the walkway," Frances squeaked. Her voice was getting higher with panic. The 2 agents quickly made their way to the front doors of the school, where they could be surrounded by parents, students, and staff entering the building. "What are we going to do, Ashley? What is our plan?" Ashley was calming down as they were safe at the front of the school. "Frances, we're going to wait for the rest of LB6 to arrive, share the news, and figure out our plan together," soothed Ashley. Alberta Playground Playtopia were going to be working for the next 3 days, so they had time. "Right you are, Ashley. Good point," said Frances. As the rest of the lunch bunch arrived at school, they were pulled into the confidential circle of the team, and Ashley and Frances brought the others up to speed. Frances lost her confident veneer and was as white as a ghost. "Brandon, what's our plan?" asked Ashley. Brandon did not hesitate. "The first part is to get adults involved. Little kids can do big things, but this is too big for us alone." Andrew joined in. "As soon as the bell rings, Ashley and Frances go to the front office. Ask Miss Dayton to call both of you down to the office when Mrs. D gets to the school for her book drop-off. Tell her it is really important that you talk to her today." The girls went straight to the office when the bell rang. Before the girls could get any of their words out, Miss Dayton, the school secretary, took one look at Frances and asked, "Are you feeling okay, Frances? You look pale." Frances found her voice and said, "I'm just a little bit tired today, Miss Dayton." The girls relayed the request, and Miss Dayton assumed a book from the public library had been lost or damaged, and assured the girls she would pass the message on to Mrs. Dewberry when she did the Monday book drop-off. Ashley and Frances hurried to the classroom to start their day. "Try to keep things as normal as possible, Frances. We don't want anybody asking us questions. Business as usual." With all that had happened already this morning, business as usual was difficult. Ms. McAllister welcomed the children and reminded them that this was the last month of kindergarten. They reviewed kindness and friendship that they learned in February. She told the children that we all needed to try very hard to be kind friends in the month of June. She explained that there was lots of time during the first 3 weeks of June to explore and learn. And today, she explained that there was lots of time during the first 3 weeks of June to explore and learn, and then the last week of school would be busy. She said that there would be two notes in their backpacks today after school for parents to read. The first note was a list of all the important events and the dates they were to occur in the month of June. The second note was an unexpected surprise for the families. It said, "Ms. Megan McAllister and Mr. Ron Richardson request your presence as guests at their wedding dance, Saturday, June 27th, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock at the Hillcrest Community Hall in Hillcrest, Alberta." The invitation to the wedding dance of Ms. M was the talk of the class. All Kindies wanted to attend. Frances had something else to occupy her thoughts but besides the rough start to her day. At the sharing circle, Miss M asked the children for some ideas about what they wanted to do the last month of kindergarten. She asked them for 2 wishes each. Frances only had 1 wish. "I have only 1 wish, Ms. McAllister. The only wish I've ever wanted in my whole life is to learn, practice, and perform a beautiful song at your wedding." Matthew groaned and Andrew rolled his eyes. Pooja knew this wasn't going to go well and looked uncomfortable. Miss M thanked the children for all the wonderful ideas and thought they could do most of them. "Unfortunately, Frances, the wedding singer had to be booked months ago and is singing at the wedding ceremony," Ms. McAllister explained. "We hired a disc jockey to play at the dance. You are more than welcome to sing along with the songs he plays at the dance." And then Miss M dropped the subject and quickly moved on to story time. At first recess, Andrew called a lunch bunch meeting for the first recess and asked the crew to meet at the far end of the field. Frances was preoccupied with the wedding invitation, and she could barely eat her snack. The upsetting start to her day was fading and becoming a distant memory. She thought she would burst with excitement, and then the bell rang. She charged outside when the bell rang and gathered at the meeting place. With the events of the morning, the priority for the rest of the team was to get adult help as soon as they could. Andrew took charge. "This is what we know. Although we don't think Mrs. Dewberry is still a suspect because she wasn't in Mountain Creek when the crime took place, we still need to be very careful what we tell her. We don't know what her connection to the crime is yet. Leroy is off the list as well," he explained. "Why don't we withhold the information and suggest that she comes back to school with Detective Callahan ASAP?" LB6 felt the idea would work, and they circled around, hands in, and chanted, "LB6. When everybody was ready to scatter and play, Frances announced, "I think the lunch bunch should surprise Ms. M with a special song at her wedding dance." Probably that was the first time the 3 boys did a synchronized eye roll. They said that they were not interested and ran off to play. Pooja and Ashley saw how upset Frances was that the boys dismissed her song idea. Pooja reminded Frances, "Frances, Miss M said that someone else was singing." Ashley didn't want to upset her further, but confirmed what Pooja was saying was true. "I heard that too, Frances. Miss M already has made her plans." Frances was deflated and started to cry. Ashley, the rule follower, had an idea. "Why don't the girls and the boys, if they wanted to, learn the songs that the disc jockey played at the family dance? We can listen to much music at home, learn the words, and then we can sing to them as the disc jockey plays them at the wedding dance." "We will sing and dance," rejoiced Pooja. The great idea breathed new life into Frances, and she started to formulate her plan. Frances perked up. "Excellent idea, Ashley. Every recess from now until the wedding, we will practice singing and dancing." Mrs. Dewberry arrived at Mountain Creek School for her book drop-off just after the bell rang for the students to come in from recess. Upon her arrival, she was given the message that the girls asked Miss Dayton to relay. Mrs. Dewberry was curious and thought it unusual that they would need to connect with her on a Monday. She asked Miss Dayton if she could call Frances and Ashley to the office right away. Mrs. Dewberry was used to Frances and her high drama, so she was assuming that they had questions about the case they were working on. One look at the concern on Ashley and Frances's faces determined she was on the wrong track. "Mrs. Dewberry, it is very important that you contact Detective Callahan and bring him to the school today," Ashley urged. "We have a very serious situation at school that will help put the pieces together. Please call Detective Callahan and come back." LB6 had never before asked for anything like this, and she could hear the urgency in Ashley's voice and see the grave concern on Frances's face. No question, Mrs. Dewberry would drive straight to the police station and be back with the detective. "Girls, I promise I will get right on this and I will see you soon. Don't worry, team. We will be back shortly to help." The girls made their way back to class. "Do you think they will take long to get back?" wondered Ashley. Frances confirmed. "Mrs. D is good for her word. If she said she was heading straight to the police station, she will be on her way now." Mrs. Dewberry, Detective Callahan, and the parents of LB6 met at the school within half an hour. The adult group went to the office and asked Ms. Dayton if they could call all 6 children plus Leroy to the office. Mrs. Shaw told them they could have access to the school boardroom and showed them the way. When the children arrived at the office, Mrs. Shaw took them into the boardroom. Inside sat a parent of each of the lunch bunch, Detective Callahan and Mrs. Dewberry. Upon seeing their mums or dads, some were in tears. Detective Callahan looked very stern and businesslike as he instructed LB6 and Leroy to sit in chairs around the table. "You are not in trouble, kids. We called your parents to explain what situation we have here. We all want you safe. You must tell us everything you know. Let's start from the beginning, and don't leave out any details." Who would like to go first? With his notebook and pen in hand, he was ready to write down the details that the children shared. Brandon started at the beginning with the codes and Leroy. The team members kept the conversation going. Each LB6 member added a detail or corrected the order when it was appropriate. The children looked so small sitting in the big chairs with their feet dangling and not touching the ground. They nodded in agreement and stayed focused on the order of the events. Finally, the list of suspects was shared, including Mrs. Dewberry, Leroy, because he was in HQ with the last coded message, Mr. Patrick, because the team found him odd at their first meeting, and finally, the crew that were building the school at the same time the robbery took place. "I was a suspect?" whined Leroy. "I just like puzzles and mystery, that is all." Then it was Detective Callahan's turn. "Mrs. Dewberry came to me last week and asked me to check the construction workers as suspects. We cleared them at the time of the crime and rechecked them last week. They were a local construction company, and everybody was accounted for." Mrs. Dewberry spoke up. "I had no idea the gems and the spoon were hidden in your headquarters." "Me neither, I promise," said Leroy. Mrs. Dewberry continued, "I was looking to connect Leroy with Frances. I thought since they went to the same school, he might get to know her and her new friends. Leroy is a mystery man, and he is a junior member of the Mountain Creek Cold Case Crimes Club. He came up with the idea of the codes. His involvement with the codes was to lead you to discover the empty space and set up HQ. The connection between HQ and the hidden robbery items was purely coincidental." Detective Callahan stood up to signal the meeting was over. "I will call my team immediately, and we'll take the playground crew down to the station to question them. I will keep you posted. Let's go to the library, storage room, to get the stolen goods." By Wednesday, Detective Callahan, Mrs. Dewberry, and adults were back at the school and called a follow-up meeting with the lunch bunch in the boardroom. Mrs. Dewberry announced, "I have something to share with all of you." She was holding a copy of a press release. "This will be printed in our local paper. Local students solve 3-year-old cold crime case. Little kids can do big things. In the small town of Mountain Creek, a group of school children solved a 3-year-old robbery case. They discovered the gems in an undisclosed location at their school, Mountain Creek Elementary School. The gems were believed to be hidden during construction of the school when the thieves were hampered in their attempts to leave town after the museum robbery." "The story was exactly the same that the boss relayed to the lunch bunch," said Detective Callahan. "When the school was under construction, the playground was also being built. Alberta Playground Playtopia, a company from Edmonton, Alberta, won the contract to construct it. They put out an all-call for workers to help for a week's work in Mountain Creek. They brought their own employees and did not hire locally. One evening when the playground crew was working late, a couple of the workers snooped around the construction site and found the empty room. They took their breaks in the dead space. The museum was broken into and robbed at the same time the school construction was in progress. 2 playground workers were involved in the robbery. The robbery team didn't count on the police putting up roadblocks at every exit out of town. They dismantled the Star and used different exits to separately leave town. The Star was long gone and on the way to Edmonton with one of the robbers. When the second thief knew he wouldn't make it through the check stop with the gems and the spoon, he doubled back and hid them in the dead space at the school. Then the robber left town. He made it through the check stop, but without the stolen goods. "What happens now?" asked Brandon. Detective Callahan continued with the follow-up. In the end, 2 of the Alberta Playground Playtopia crew were arrested and charged with the museum heist. The stolen property was returned to the rightful owners, the Patrick family. Finally, Mrs. Dewberry spoke up. "Detective Callahan and I met with all of your parents at the library to discuss the events that unfolded and the important part you played in solving the cold case. We decided and agreed that in future, LB6 must ask for help from trusted adults. Some wonderful news that we shared with your parents and would like to share with you is that LB6 has earned a substantial reward from the Patrick family for solving the crime. We decided we would use the reward to buy a computer for your HQ along with new furniture." Francis hooted with glee and called out, "Agents, circle in, hands in," and they shouted, "LB6, and jumped and danced and cheered ecstatically about their reward. "Children, one more thing," Mrs. Dewberry called. "The trusted adults are Detective Callahan, myself, and your parents. One other adult, an ally of LB6, can be trusted. That person has had a watchful eye on your safety every step of this adventure. We are just waiting to get approval from that person to spill the beans on his or her identity."